Ladies and gentlemen, my name is TotalBiscuit. I'm here to ask and answer one simple question. WTF is Super Time Force Ultra. Well, this game originally came out on the Xbox One. It was one of the first timed exclusives for that particular platform. It's now made its way to PC and has some additional content in it as a direct result. The Steam version, in fact, has 3 bonus characters from Valve Games, and it also has additional challenge levels in the form of the holodeck. But what is it, though, you might ask? It's one of those games that's a little difficult to define in the traditional genre sense. It's by a company called Capybara Games, and they have made titles like Sword and Sorcery Super Brothers. They are also currently making Below, and they did a few ports like Clash of Heroes to the DS as well as the HD version. I think outside of Super Brothers, it's safe to say that this is probably their biggest project that they've put out up to this point. Super Brothers originally came out on mobile devices and then ended up on PC, and it was a pretty interesting little game. But Super Time Force Ultra, well, they've gone whole hog in terms of making some very interesting mechanics and creating something that doesn't really have a easily identifiable genre. I think if you were to look initially at it, you'd say, oh, right, it's a retro platformer, or it's kind of like Contra in some way. Yes and no. Right? If you were going to describe it by analogy and by comparison, then the best way to do that would be to say, look, if we took Lost Vikings, Contra, Braid, and Lemmings, and we threw them all in together, then we might have something resembling Super Time Force Ultra. But I'd rather just show you the mechanics and you can make your own mind up. Ultimately, the genre does not really matter in this case. Okay, let's have a look at the settings. I'm actually using a controller for this. I'll tell you why in a minute. It's not because the keyboard controls do not work. They do, but they do have a couple of issues in the tutorial area. So if we look at the settings, there's not really a huge amount to see here. Bear in mind, of course, it is a retro-style 2D game, so you're not going to have a huge number of graphics options. But you can do things like change to exclusive full screen, windowed full screen, and windowed mode. Always nice to have the borderless there. And you can mess around with the aspect ratio as well if you so desire. And then you have resolution options, VSync on or off, and then you've got things like vibration for your pad and separate sliders for music and sound effects. Plus, you can clear the save file out. That is really about it, but you do have these rebindable keys right here. That's the gamepad controls right there, which actually can be rebound, by the way, which is just lovely. And then if I want to rebind that, that's actually a very easy thing to do, he says. There we go, it worked that time. So you can rebind the keyboard and mouse controls very easily, although scrolling through this menu is a bit of a pain in the ass for some reason. I'm not really sure why that is. But never mind, I'm just going to go back. No. Okay, there we go. I've messed up the keyboard controls. That's fine, I'm not using them anyway. So, the problem with using keyboard and mouse is not that the game isn't suited for it. It absolutely is. The problem is that in the tutorial, it only gives you prompts for the controller, regardless of whether or not the controller is plugged in. This is mostly because it does one of those... What's the best way to describe it? It demonstrates it through actual parts of the level. It's like the controls are built into the level design itself. They're actual graphical assets, which I believe is the reason why it doesn't change over. And while that's nice and stylish, it's not practical for the PC version. So I ended up just using the controller, especially considering in the first attempt at the tutorial I got somewhat confused and decided just to quit and come back to it another day, and now I have, and now I finally get the idea. So let's get into it and show you exactly what's going on. So I'm through the tutorial area and the first major area, and there are, as you can see, 6 major areas in total here, and then there's the holodeck, which has 50 challenges, and there's a few other things that you can do as well. You can hang around here and you can check out your various characters, and you can have a look at a little bit of the collectible aspect of things. Collect enough of these globes, you'll unlock stuff, and all sorts of things like that. It's like, here is how many of these I've got, here's how many badges I have. You can go and have a look at all of this stuff. So, it's essentially one giant trophy room. Outside of that, though, you're able to pick any of these, and you're also able to play the holodeck. Now, the holodeck plays a little bit differently to the regular levels, and I'll show you how that plays in a minute, but let's jump into one of these. Where do we want to go? Do we want to go dinosaurs? We could do that. I'm actually, as you can see, over halfway through, well, exactly halfway through the dinosaur level, so we can jump into this. Since I just got a jetpack, this seems like an ideal place to play. So the Super Time Force, commanded by Commander Repitsky, travel around time blowing up these robots for some reason. And you can collect additional members of the Time Force, and you can spawn them whenever you like. So in this case, I currently have 5 characters. You start with just this one, and then you get these 2 pretty much immediately, and then you can unlock these. And a lot of it actually comes down to whether or not you can actually save them, because most of these characters are about to die, and you have to save them in order to collect them and add them to your team. So we'll start off with this one right here. So each of these characters has a different regular fire button, as well as a different special attack, which requires you to hold down the fire button to charge up for some reason, which is a bit weird. I mean, you could have actually very easily put it on a different button, considering a lot of the buttons aren't even used. So I'm not really sure why they bothered with the hold down thing, but they did. Now, what you can then do is you can rewind time at any point by calling a timeout, which in the case of a controller you hit the B button for. And this will allow you to spawn an additional member of the Time Force, so indeed a copy of the existing member, and you can independently control them. But whatever you've done with the previous members up to that point is still recorded. So let's just say there we go, I'm going to grab that. So you can see the little blurry character right there. I actually already have a member of the Time Force, and he was traveling along with me there. And he can add his firepower to mine. So you can efficiently make your way through the level by killing stuff and traversing obstacles a lot faster by adding multiple members in. But here's the thing. What happens if you die? Well, you die in one hit in this game. Yeah. So my character died. Can I save my character from dying? Or should I just continue on? Maybe I can save my character from dying. What if I was hit by an asteroid there, so I'm probably going to have to use some kind of shield. What if I used Shieldy Blockerson here? And was then able, to grab the slow-mo power-up. So it looks like I'm going to be hit around here. Place a shield, which deflected the asteroid. And look, I saved the character. And now, that actually turns the character into a power-up you can use, which allows you to take 1 additional hit for every character you've got there. And it also... Oh, that was pretty poor, wasn't it? Again, I could probably do the same thing here to optimize, but it also adds the ability for all of your charged attacks to fire simultaneously, so you can end up being this extremely powerful individual. Alternatively, you don't even have to do that. It's certainly possible to just keep rewinding and make the kills quicker and more efficient, and just collect a force of characters that are all fighting alongside, but you played all of them. It's the really intriguing part of this. And you're going to be, I think, in a difficult position if you're going to try and find a game that does this. Because the closest that I could figure, again, was probably Lemmings and Lost Vikings, where you would be using a lemming to block an area to send the lemmings in another direction, or Lost Vikings, you'd say, all right, well, I'm going to... That did not go well. I was certainly hoping for better. But here's the thing. I could stop all of that from happening by just rewinding back here and then killing off that character down there. If I didn't suck, that is. There we go. Let's try that again. If I kill off that character before they're even able to kill mine, then as you can see, I was able to save that character from their horrible demise. There we go. And now I have a powered-up character. You see how this works? It's actually... God damn it. I'm not good at it. I'll admit that. I will happily admit that. There we go. Let's try and work our way through here. That should solve the problem, and that means that my character shouldn't die, so I'll be able to collect them again. The principles behind it are surprisingly simple, but the stuff that you can do with it is really interesting and complex. And it's all focused on the combat, which is why I made the comment earlier that the genre of this game is questionable at best. Because you have what is effectively an action platformer, but a lot of the elements within it actually could be classified, in my opinion, as a puzzle game, really. But it's more of a real-time puzzle game, whereby you are solving these short real-time and very dynamic puzzles that you yourself have generated in the first place, because a lot of these situations you yourself created, which is what makes it super interesting. So rather than a preset puzzle, which the game does have, by the way, the holodeck is actually very much about these preset puzzles, which only give you a certain number of timeouts and things like that. But the main mode, it's like the game is creating puzzles dynamically based on what you're doing, or more to the point, damn it, you are the one creating puzzles. And I find that really interesting. Very interesting indeed. Let's... Oh, too slow on the shield. Okay, can we actually... I think we might have to sacrifice that character. I don't think there's a way that I can kill that character off before that happens. So, unfortunately, I think we will have to sacrifice him for the good of the land. Your sacrifice will be remembered. Let's play the dinosaur for no reason. There we go. And we'll collect one of these to slow things down. That's what we like to see. And then I should be able to eat that up, no problem at all. There's maybe a way to save him there. Maybe I just wasn't smart enough, but... Man, it is incredibly interesting. It's a really original game. You don't see this combination of mechanics really anywhere else, to the best of my knowledge. As I said, Lost Vikings is a fairly apt comparison, because it was a game where you controlled multiple characters, but only one at once at any given time, and you used the various characters' abilities in synergy to complete the levels. But in this game, it's less about, oh, move this character here, then stop him, move this character here, then stop him. It's more a case of you're doing all of that simultaneously, and you can rewind time in order to allow what would otherwise be an effectively impossible real-time situation to occur. Like, for instance, you know, how did I die here? Well, it looks like I ended up being hit by an asteroid. It might be possible for me to stop that, certainly. I was actually dodging that character. It may be possible for me to stop that with the shield here if I'm particularly quick. There we go. I did, but then I died. So now I can stop my other character from dying by killing him before my shield character lands on him. That is phenomenal. As an example of really interesting game mechanics, it is absolutely stellar. And it really does make you think, but not in the kind of way that I find puzzle games to be frustrating, because, you know, I am legendarily a complete and total idiot, as everyone is probably well aware. I mean, when it comes to... And eventually we will be able to kill this guy. I'm going to have to use a lot of timeouts to do it, but eventually we'll be able to kill him. I am a legend when it comes to just how idiotic I am with puzzle games. I am a moron, like, complete moron with puzzle games. But here, you know, I very easily... I see all of these challenges as light real-time puzzles, and as a direct result, I find them much easier to solve. Although, it is notable to say that you can solve quite a lot of these puzzles really through sheer brute force a lot of the time. Which is kind of what I'm doing right now. I'm burning a lot of timeouts to eventually... Because I'll be able to eventually put enough bullets in the sky to say, alright, this guy is clearly going to die before he's able to kill a bunch of my force. But then I'm going to have to probably go back and shield my force from a bunch of those asteroids. And maybe I might be able to pick everything up, or maybe I won't. Who knows? But yeah, this is a very brute force approach. Now, a lot of the levels do give you plenty of timeouts. So, there we go. We saved pretty much all of them there. There we go. I will accept that. That's cool. So I'm actually going to get a bunch of lives here. But we did waste a lot of time doing it, didn't we? Which is not ideal. But I can collect some power-ups from time to time, which will allow me to fix that. There we go. Oh, that was dumb. Did I also lose a lot of my power-ups back here? I think maybe I did. Could I even save more characters? I think I could. What hit that character in the first place? It was an asteroid, okay. So, I could fix that. There we go. It's actually a game that I think you could very easily obsess over when it comes to just being a perfectionist. And frankly, I think that's also the idea. There's enough leeway to ensure that you can make your way through this game and get through the levels in a reasonable length of time, yeah? You will not get the perfect score, you will not get all the collectibles and so on and so forth, but you can make it. Because they give you a fairly generous number, at least in the early levels anyway, of timeouts. Some of the boss fights work that way as well, and now, by the way, before we talk about the boss fights, this is how the level went down. Now it's going to play it all back in real time, as if every character was a real character, which, effectively, in the timeline, they are. So, you can watch my character go through here, and then there's an extra character here. I dodged around and blocked there. I absolutely love watching these level recaps, actually, because they just demonstrate in real time what a beautiful ballet of gameplay you have on offer here. If you were to ever make an argument, and I think you should make this argument, there was a really cool video that I watched yesterday from a guy called, I believe it's Brutal Talcum Powder. Or Brutalcum Powder, I believe was his name. And he had a number of good points on the issue of, instead of critiquing games as art based on things like story and voice acting and aesthetic, we should also be looking at gameplay, because there are games that can stand on their own as being artistic in terms of gameplay. I think Super Time Force is maybe one of those. the sheer amount of creativity that's offered here, and I suppose this strange amount of simplicity that the game really offers, because if you look at the help menu, it just says, look, you can this is how you beat this game, and there's like one page. But there's so much more going on, and each individual situation needs to be approached in a different way. And I just love getting myself out of messes. I think that's what the game offers, a very unique way of making the most of your mistakes. And most games do not offer that. Most games just say, oh, you made a mistake, we're going to actively punish you for that. And I'm not saying that that's the wrong way to design a game, but in this game, a mistake can lead to much more interesting gameplay and really innovative solutions to get out of these situations. So it's almost like the game revels in the mistakes that you make and builds game mechanics around that. That I find extremely intriguing, and that I think is where the true originality of the game actually lies. Outside of that, the game does have a story. I'm not personally someone that really digs the writing. It's a little silly, a bit puerile from time to time, but again, I'm not actually that concerned about it. You can skip the vast majority of it. I really actually don't care for the most part, because the gameplay is king here, as it should be. You know, it's king in most circumstances, isn't it? I don't know what that is, but it's going to try and murder me. And cool, we have a little bit of a boss fight here. Now, so far, the boss fights that I've done seem to have boiled down to spawn as many units as possible and fire as many bullets as possible. Because playing a single character, the chances are you don't have the firepower to kill the boss in 30 seconds. Yeah? In 60 seconds, sorry. But if you spawn multiple characters, then eventually you can just kind of bring the boss down with sheer weight of fire. Which I think, you know, could potentially be a problem. I'm hoping that it gets a little bit more interesting later on. Now, as you can see, so we had 10 seconds there, a boss phase, and now the boss has moved out of range, so I can't shoot at him. That's one of the mechanics that they use to mitigate this whole idea of just bullet spam in the general direction of the enemy to kill them. They have boss phases where the boss is invulnerable for one reason or another, but I want to inflict a bit more damage at the start here, so I'm going to do just that. And I'm still thinking that the best way to do that is probably either through the guy that has the bullet spray, or maybe the rocket launcher guy here. Oh, this is getting nothing done. Okay. So we managed to get a direct hit there, but I think for the first phase, we probably want to spam either this character or this character, just to do as much damage as humanly possible. There we go. And you'll see the health bar will, of course, go down. I don't want to lose characters if at all possible, but maybe I do want to lose characters. This game challenges conventions of standard design by saying, well, it's bad to lose characters, right? But what if it's not? Because you can turn that loss into gain by turning that character into a power-up, which you can then use to augment your firepower. So interesting. And that's, in my opinion, award-winning innovative design. Frankly. I can't think of another way to describe it. That's a really cool way of doing things, right? There we go. And now I've saved that character. And now, as a direct result, I will be able to use his ability as well as my shield ability here. Okay, so we've got him down to about 20% health. We could probably... I don't know if we can kill him in the first phase. It might be possible to lay down enough fire to do that. I'm going to see if that is possible. I imagine there's probably a mechanic that prevents that from happening. But maybe we can kill him in the first phase. Although, it is worth noting that the game does give you awards for not using a bunch of timeouts and rewinds. Like I said before, you can brute force a lot of the real-time puzzles that this game offers you, as well as the boss fights, by simply rewinding a lot. Yeah? And the way that the game sort of handles that is by just giving you optional objectives that say, yeah, don't do that. Like, you gotta be a little bit better, right? So we've gone down just a little bit lower there. Probably want a character that just has better spray. Aiming is actually a little bit tricky in this game, because you've got the Contra-style aiming, but you aim with the same button on the thumbstick as you do for movement. The right thumbstick is actually not used at all, which is a little strange. But I believe there is a button that allows you to lock your aim in a particular direction. It's just not default. And I think that definitely helps. Again, that's something that Contra had to deal with and managed to solve with the whole locking aim functionality. But yeah, you see how this is going on there. So we've done a decent amount of damage in the first phase. I'll maybe throw down one more. Actually, is it retreating at a certain time? I think it's actually retreating at around 25% health. So I think we're actually triggering the the boss to move backwards, and that's the way that in this fight they have decided to mitigate the whole idea of just spamming as much fire as possible within the first phase and killing him. So we've hit him a few more times here, and with the amount of damage we've done to him, yeah, he's going to retreat even faster. So there you go. That's how they got around it. Really interesting way, I think, of trying to get around the problem. I don't think it's 100% effective, certainly, but it does mean that if you use too many timeouts in the first phase, those characters that you were using earlier, well, they're all going to disappear. So I used 8 timeouts in the first phase. Is that too many? Arguably it is, because all of these characters that are just firing here are now going to disappear, so I'm left on my own again, which is not ideal, is it? So if we want to maybe rewind to here. There we go, and I think, again, we will use this guy's ability. But Super Time Force is easily one of the most original and innovative games I've played in a very long time, and it doesn't take that much to really start to do really cool things in it. Yeah? I think it's going to be one of those games that will require a ludicrous amount of work to actually properly master, yes, but it is worth noting that in order to pull off really cool time tricks, you really don't have to do a lot, because it just really involves rewinding and then seeing what happens based on what your previous avatar did versus what your current avatar is doing. There we go. We're going to time out here just because we got through this whole sequence. I want to add a bunch of additional damage to it. I'm not sure if this is going to trigger a third phase. We'll give it a shot. Now, what else is there to talk about? I suppose you could talk about things like sound effects, you can talk about the music. I'm personally not a big fan of the music. It uses a lot of chiptune style stuff. I think the game perhaps would have been suited with maybe a more pumping soundtrack, but that, frankly, is subjective opinion. I don't think there's really a huge amount to complain about with the music, but I personally did not like it. The aesthetic I can take or leave. It is fine. It serves its purpose, yeah? There's nothing that springs out to me as being incredible. There are plenty of games, I think, that do a really amazing job of the retro art style that look absolutely phenomenal. This is not one of those games. Occasionally, you do see some really cool things, like the fact that that's a giant shark airship, and the character design is not too shabby either. And it does invoke memories of older titles, but this is clearly a new game, you know, with new ideas and new concepts. But it's not an aesthetic that I would go out of my way to say, oh wow, what an incredible example of this particular kind of aesthetic. But ultimately, I don't really care that much. I mean, the game mechanics are king here, and king is definitely the way that I would describe the game mechanics in this particular title. No real doubt about that. We're going to have to do more damage to him before he pulls back into this phase, because otherwise we will run out of time. So I'm going to... yeah, I think pulling back here seems fairly reasonable. And we can maybe launch some rockets if I aim properly with Mr. Jeff Leopard over here. There we go. Very nice. Charge up some rockets. Hit him with them. It's actually kind of difficult to hit the enemy with this character. Not impossible, but you got to lead the target in a big way. There we go. A bit more of that. And then let's rewind again. And I'm just going to pour fire on with the guy with the spread shot now, I think. Seems like the best way to go. Less accuracy required. It can become a real colorful mess, but thankfully you don't really have to worry too much about that. You only have to really focus on your current character, unless you're going back to deliberately save a member of the Time Force prior to that. There we go, a bit extra fire, and time out once again. It is possible, by the way, that I may not have done the phases quickly enough. I'm not sure. He may be triggering a final phase, and I might have run out of time. It's possible, so I might have to run all the way back to actually beat this boss fight. But I'll tell you this for a fact. It is also quite refreshing to see a game that has implied failure states that aren't simply a game over screen. Like, this is not only a game that has... I wouldn't even say implied failure states. It does have failure states, but they're not so binary. And it's a game that actually makes gameplay out of those failure states, and I really appreciate that. I think there's a lot to be said for just how beneficial that is in terms of making a very interesting game. I don't think that's something that you can apply to everything, but in this case, I think that it's definitely... oh, that was bad, okay. I'm going to rewind and kill this stuff a little bit quicker to hopefully bring him back, and then we can probably finish him off in the last phase here. But there is a lot to be said about how truly interesting and innovative that really is. And that's... innovative, by the way, is a term I do not use lightly. It is something that's bandied around by an awful lot of people for no real reason, for stuff that doesn't actually deserve it. But Super Time Force, yeah, Super Time Force, without question, deserves that particular description, because that is exactly what it is. Okay, let's put down a shield here. We can maybe shield ourselves from the explosion. I think that was maybe a bit early. But if we blow that up earlier, then we can probably avoid the explosion killing our characters over here in the first place. Damn, I love time manipulation. Such an interesting subject that more often than not is not dealt with properly in any way. But what an interesting investigation of what time manipulation can really mean in a video game. And yet, executed in such a way that is actually fairly accessible, surprisingly enough. That was terrible. I only have 12 of these rewinds left. I want to beat this boss fight for you. I really do. And then I want to watch the replay of how it worked out. That's what I've been looking forward to the most, actually, I think, out of all of this. I just really want to beat this thing and show you what this fight actually is in reality. Okay. And we have saved, I think, the majority of these characters. And that is... yeah, we beat him. Fantastic. I want to watch that again. Let's have a look at that. Alright. This is the boss fight. This is the Super Time Force battling this guy in real time. Man, that is so cool. There are very few games, I think, these days that really put a lot of enthusiasm into my head. And I can say without a hint of irony or hyperbole, wow, that is so cool. And that's such a smart game mechanic. And the design of this game is actually truly innovative. But I can say it now. I absolutely can. Super Time Force Ultra is that in many ways. Now, from what I've been told, especially based on the fact that the game has, of course, been beaten on Xbox One for months now, and they haven't added... The levels they've added haven't really been to the storyline. They've added the holodeck kind of puzzles to the Ultra Edition on PC. I can say the game is really not all that long, but I think the game has a decent degree of replayability if, again, you are the sort of person that really adores the notion of score attack, because I'm sure I could have done that boss fight a hell of a lot better. I'm sure I could have collected all the badges on this level, but I didn't. I'm not the sort of person that really cares too much about that. But, frankly, if you are, then I think you're going to have a field day with this. There we go. Alright, I'll show you a little bit of the holodeck, and then I'll come to my conclusion on Super Time Force Ultra. I think you already know that even if I didn't like the game, I would have had to respect it, simply on the basis of how interesting the mechanics are. But thankfully, I also do like the game, although I think maybe I like watching the game more than I actually like playing it. Let's jump into the holodeck. So, I was talking earlier about these dynamic failure-generated puzzles. I think it's maybe the best way to describe it, because your own failures generate real-time puzzles which you have to rewind in order to solve, right? The holodeck actually has puzzles, yeah? So, the first level is fairly easy. I'll show you how it works. And the idea of the holodeck is there's 50 levels of you trying to collect these so-called globes. If they hit the floor, you probably noticed that in the level I ran through, they will shatter, yeah? So you have to collect them both, but they're both going to drop at the same time. How do you do that, you might ask? Well, yeah, we want to open one, and then we want to open the other, and then we'll place one guy here, wait for this timer to run out. There we go, and we collected it. Now we just rewind. Cool, and then we can spawn another version of the character to hop over to the other side and grab it. That is the simplest version of it. Then it gets much, much more complicated from there on in. And all of these levels only give you a limited number of timeouts. So instead of being able to collect a bunch more in the levels, which you can do, and also being given a fairly generous allotment of them in the first place, you have to deal with a limited number of timeouts. For instance, this level, you have to collect one globe, but you only have one timeout. So you have to figure out exactly how the level works in the first place. So how does it work? Well, I've got to press this button. Yeah, sure. And that then opens that. Oh no, it actually closes it. Yeah, see, that's the really interesting thing about it. So I do need to stand under here, yeah? But what I do here is I rewind and I go right back to the start. So before I did any of that, I actually moved my character underneath to allow this to open. And then once that opens, I will be able to activate that button. Yep. See what I'm doing there? But, there you go. I screwed it up completely, as it turns out. Well, it's more complicated than I initially expected. You see, this is where I fall to pieces, because this is actual puzzles. Like, no! What am I doing? Oh, I got my character stuck, and now... It's a little bit weird, isn't it? But it's a really cool idea. And I'm glad that they put those in. Personally, I have no interest. None. I think some of that... there you go. So some of them actually have multiple characters. Or we can maybe try this one. Give that one a shot. This I have no interest in, because I'm just not a big fan of puzzle games, which is what the game turns into at that point. But I'm glad that they gave it as an option. That's actually fantastic. That's really, really great. Okay, well, none of that ended up working. Can I actually hit that from here? I can. Okay. Good to know. Let's rewind. Bear in mind, of course, I only have a limited number of tries, so let's try not to screw it up completely. So that collects 1. There's 5, by the way, on this level, so you got to figure everything out as you go. It's damn cool that they offered that, you know, I have to say. But the main game for me is the meat. That's what I really enjoy, and Super Time Force Ultra, without question, is a game that you should at least be having a look at based on my first impressions. There's a lot of material out there to give you additional information from people, of course, who've beaten the game on Xbox One months and months and months ago, so it's not a particularly risky purchase. Go and read a few more reviews as well. My first impressions of it are that it's absolutely phenomenal in terms of its game mechanics, and I want to play more of it. And I will. So there you go. You can pick up Ultra for $15 or your regional equivalent on Axiom Esports sponsor GOG, or you can pick it up on Steam as well as the developer's website. My name has been TotalBiscuit. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you next time.